Well, we've come inside the castle. In a moment, we'll meet Professor Nick Petford, who's the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Northampton, who's going to be talking about the big society. But first, let's meet Andrea Leadsom, Conservative MP for South Northamptonshire, Gavin Shuker, Labour MP for Luton South, and an audience of interested parties. Gavin Shuker, to you first of all. Giving more people a say in planning has to be at least a good ambition, doesn't it?
I think it is a very good ambition. I suppose what some of the things that we will talk about today will draw out though as well is that there's a tension between big national infrastructure type decisions and not overbearing local communities at the same time. And I suppose our guiding position should be if it's important for the national interest, we go with that, but everything else should be locally decided.
Andrea Leadsom, would you say that the problem with localism is that basically people's hopes have been raised and then dashed again?
No, not at all. The localism bill is going through Parliament at the moment, so we're in a bit of a grey area right now where we're still under legislation passed by the previous government and we're waiting to approach this brave new world where genuinely local people will have their say on local issues. As Gavin says, that doesn't mean all infrastructure projects that are in the national interest can be included in that. So there needs to be an area where the government still has a say.
Well, let's meet somebody who's been directly affected by this. Roger Kingston wants to come in here. He's from the Northants Residents Alliance. Concerned about the lack of infrastructure, you've got 20,000 houses to the west of Northampton being built. Localism is working for you or not?
It's not working for us. We're still governed by an undemocratically unelected Quango, and yet we have been living on new estates for 10 years or more, haven't yet had the infrastructure completed for the housing estates that they live on. So we hoped that this new coalition government would give us some say in that, some control over that. But I understand, and Andrea's well aware of what the problem is, it's not possible for them.
Andrea, what do you make of that? You've said this government will deliver planning power back to local authorities that know and understand the local area. The reality is disappointment, isn't it?
Well, the issue is, as I said earlier, that we're in a grey area at the moment, and the West Northants Development Corporation will cease to exist. Unfortunately, to get rid of it before, I think, 2013 would require primary legislation. It just takes so long to reverse some of these top-down planning policies that were introduced by the last government, and likewise with the regional spatial strategy that's done so much damage to Northamptonshire in terms of planning that wasn't wanted. It's very difficult to put a stop to it.
Gavin Shuker, what about these referenda? Local people can instigate a local referendum. That's an ambitious plan. It's a bold initiative, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a hugely interesting idea. I suppose one of my concerns, though, is that we have a system of democratic accountability which involves selecting people who stand locally to represent the interests of their own area. And I have concerns that we're actually undermining local government in some of those pushes and initiatives.
What about the rest of the audience? Does anyone here believe that localism is working? Do you have a view?
Well, we actually had a referendum under the old rules. I know the localism bill hasn't been passed yet. We were supporting our local council, in actual fact, because they had turned down planning for the radioactive waste to be stored. 98% of people who voted did not want it, and it was overturned by the Secretary of State, who said, as you have said, the national interest takes precedent over local interest. I would say, where has been the national debate?
Andrea Leadsom, do you have a response to this lady's concern?
Well, I have every sympathy. I mean, I'm very concerned about that particular issue too. And I do think that there needs to be a national debate specifically about radioactive waste. But with regards to the localism bill, I think everybody would agree that localism doesn't mean you can just say, right, nothing that we don't want is ever going to happen here. I don't think anybody believes that that's possible or desirable. I think nuclear waste is a very different issue. But where, for example, incinerators, I mean, even wind farms, elsewhere. I personally am, again, very questioning of the technology, but I do think that there are issues, there are big projects where government, national interest has to hold sway over localism.
Okay, I do want to move on to big society, so we'll talk about that. And let's bring in Professor Nick Petford. Your university is a socially enterprising university, so you obviously foresee this sector growing in future. In what ways will it grow? How will you be developing this over the years?
Well, I think there are a number of ways that we could see it grow, and one example would be helping people set up companies, and they could be third sector, could be charity organisations, or perhaps parts of the public services that have been outsourced, to help them to create their own companies and take charge of their own destiny through setting themselves up as social enterprise, as social entrepreneurs, where, of course, the profits that they generate, and the key thing here is that these entities must be profit generating. That money is ploughed back into the good of the company, and it doesn't go to shareholders through dividends.
Let's talk about some voluntary projects. Councillor Tom Beattie, at the beginning of the programme, we went to see the woods that have been developed in Corby. Fantastic reclamation work going on there. What about this label Big Society? What do you think of it? Do you like it?
Not really. I mean, in Corby, we've developed a sort of partnership approach to these things over many years. People volunteer in Corby because they want to help each other. They want to help local residents. I think Corby people are perhaps somewhat cheesed off to be part of what to me appears to be nothing more than a rebranding exercise of the Conservative Party, with cuts as well, affecting local community groups. The ability to be able to do these things is being reduced. I mean, it's going to be the beg society rather than the big society, I would have thought.
Gavin Shuker, what about this basic premise of encouraging communities to work together, to look after themselves? It's a great idea.
It is. I'm a massive advocate of the ideas behind the big society, and my background is in the charitable sector as well. The problem, though, and it's been put much more articulately than I ever could by the guests on this side, is the money isn't there to do it. And we are beginning to see more and more social enterprises, charities, other groups go to the wall, actually, because they're not able to receive that funding. And I think it is pretty unfair to raise people's hopes in this way and then to dash them by not giving the money out in the first place.
Andrea Leadsom, good idea. Bad branding.
Well, I don't think so. I think the big society is more of a vision. I mean, there's no doubt that people in this country have volunteered for years and years. I mean, pretty much 4/5 of everything that goes on in the country is somebody caring for someone else, whether it's in the community, in the home, or whatever. The big society isn't a policy, it's more of a vision. And, for example, in the last budget, the government's enabled charities who shake tins to claim gift aid on that, and enabled people who want to bequest money to a charity when they die to pay it to the charity instead of to the exchequer. So it's a case of enabling people to volunteer more, encouraging companies to let their staff volunteer. And it's an enabling big vision. It's not some kind of brand that people have to slot into.
Bernie Barnes, I know you're from the Home Start charity we featured, although we'd like to make it clear you're not actually going to be suffering any cuts at the moment. How do you see the future?
Well, the future for the Home Start schemes in the county, as well as Home Start Northampton, obviously, is that we've got confirmed funding until the end of September. And we'll then be entering into a negotiating discussion.
So generally, do you feel that the idea of a big society is catching on? Do you like the idea? Dislike the title?
I think it's been oversold, and I think that is the problem. We got very excited during the run-up to the election. It's oversold.
Professor Petford, finally to you. As far as young people go, they're our future, and if they can add to a bigger society with a small b and a small s, it can add value to them as well, can't it?
I think so. And what we've seen with our students is that there's an enormous appetite for volunteering. I mean, we have 14,000 students, and each one of those is a potential volunteer who will hopefully willingly work in the community. I mean, just for an example, last year I think we volunteered 26,000 hours to the local community. And if you cost that up, that's about £500,000 worth of real money put back into the community to do good. And so I think universities have a great role in society to develop the notion of volunteering.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and thank you to you all as well. Well, that's all from us for this summer. Don't forget, you can watch the programme online at any time through our website, and Deborah McGurran will be regularly updating her blog as well. We'll be back in the autumn, and we'll see you then.